and welcome. So today we're in my garden shooting, but it is incredibly windy. But I've got some great news. We just had 6 new blue tits fledge. So the parents are like crazy, taking the food back to the tree, and some of the blue tits are actually trying to come themselves to grab a little bit of suet. So it's a great opportunity to test these 3 600mm lenses and camera combinations. So we've got the Sony RX10iv Mark IV, which is a bridge camera, but pretty much a professional bridge camera, if there is such a thing. It's as close as you're going to get, and that is absolutely fantastic. It's about £1,400. You've got the Sony a7R IV mixed with the G 200 to 600 lens. So the lens is about 1,500, and the camera's about 2,500, depending where you get it from. And then we've got that mixed with the Nikon D850 and the Tamron 150 to 600mm. And this is the sport version, so all of it is as professional as you can go, with them being zoom lenses. Obviously the primes, if you're going to do sport, is really what the top professionals are going to use if they don't need to zoom in and out, because they'll use the f2s, 400s and 600s. Okay, and this combination, the camera here is about £2,000 and the lens is about 1,000, so slightly cheaper than the newer Sony a7R IV. The bridge camera is the most versatile. And it works a lot better if you take the lens cap off. Rookie mistake, don't tell anyone. Okay, so the first test is going to be blue tits just on the feeder in front of me, and I'll be using a spot monitoring, and I'll also be using a centre or spot focus point. And it's not going to be very difficult shots to get, but it's great to show off what these lenses and camera combinations can do.
So first of all, we're looking at a photo taken by the Sony RX. I'm just going to refer to them as the Sony RX, Sony A7 and Nikon, because that's the easiest way we can differentiate. So the bokeh here is quite pleasant, really, despite it being a relatively cheap camera, especially with the glass in it. There's so much glass in it. I think I heard somewhere there's 14 elements. Obviously it's easy to look up, so that's a lot of glass that it's shooting through. So here it's quite nice. It's actually nicer than the Sony paired with a Sigma 24 to 70 lens, the 2.8 version. So I really like this, which is great. Now when we compare that to the Sony, this is with the G 200 to 600mm, it's certainly a bit more blurry, but it also looks quite a lot messier. So personally, I actually think the RX works better with that. Then when we're getting closer, it's worth comparing the Sony A7 to the Nikon. So here's straight off is one from the Nikon, and you can see that's really nice and creamy. I don't have an image further out than this, but that's just beautiful. It's very little distraction made here. And then when I compare it to the Sony, let's see if we can get a closer one. There's one of the Sony. Again, very little distraction. So the Sony possibly is just winning, although the clarity of the ring looks a bit more, whereas here it's a bit more blurred, but that's open to your own opinions. If we look at the sharpness of the lenses, so this is a really odd one. The one picture from the Nikon D850 paired with the Tamron 150 to 600 was sharper than everything else I took today, which was actually this image here. So I've deliberately not edited these, obviously with Topaz Denoise, Topaz Sharpen and the in Lightroom options you can make it amazing, so definitely for publication. But this was the sharpest image in them all. However, the Tamron is very hit and miss, so it was amazing that I got this, that it was sharp, but when you look at some of the others, that one is in focus and then that one isn't. I'm not even quite sure where the Tamron was trying to focus, because none of it's hit, and I think some of the earlier images too, yeah, here it's really unhappy, so it's not quite sure what to do. So it's great that I got one image, but it is nicer really to have a system that is going to hit almost 100%. So when we compare that to a few other images that I've selected from other cameras, that was the Nikon, remember? So when we have a look at the Sony A7, I'm going to go to number 67 here. Okay, so this is with the G lens. Now, again, that is really nicely in focus, but this part's missing now. And the G lens, Sony are dealing with it at the moment, have a really well-known problem when you mix it with the A7 body. So actually on the A9, it's pretty phenomenal, apparently. I don't have an A9. But with the G lens on the A7, it is quite hit and miss. So it's odd that it's blurry immediately. There should be more of a transition there. That was quite hit and miss. Here's a few others. So it's not, it's perfect here, and it's quite good here. But generally, especially as it's f6.3, you'd expect a bit more, really. So there's those few there. Now, when you compare it to the sharpness of the Sony RX, number 50 here, so the Sony RX is performing well across the board, and it is rarely out of focus. But when you crop in, you can see there's a really obvious difference. So actually, on these images here, I think the Sony RX and the one single image from the Tamron one, but the Sony RX is a clear winner on getting them sharp every single time. So what I would recommend is that if you are never going to crop in, use the Sony RX. But if you are going to do any cropping, it's probably worth missing a few images and then using ones from the DSLRs, because obviously they've got so many more megapixels, you can crop and not lose quality. Whereas obviously when we crop from here, it's a beautiful image, and I actually really like the bokeh. But when you zoom in, then you'd need a lot of editing. I could actually make this work because I could use Topaz Denoise, Topaz Sharpen, and the inbuilt ones, but it's an awful lot less effort for me to use the other systems. One thing that is worth to note is that it's actually cheaper for someone to buy the RX, purchase Topaz, and purchase Lightroom, and do the editing to make a really nice image than it would ever be to buy the other systems. So that's one to consider. So looking at the quality of the images, I've just selected a few that we can look at as well. So the quality here is actually really nice on the wings. This is the Sony RX, and I was really happy with that. And it's blurry where it's closer, which is really normal, but actually here and here across the board, it's got that right. And even the metal here, the Suic ball, is good. The quality for the Sony A7, I've picked numbers 7 and 8. So that's fantastic here, but because it's so hit and miss, it's quite unusably blurry here. And then 7 again, it loves the feathers, but it's not so great here. And the f-stop is still quite low, so 6.3, it should be getting a bit more. And then when we compare that to numbers 15 and 19 from the Nikon, here's 15. So the quality there as well, there's this hit and miss kind of idea going on with all of them. And 19, oops, it's loading. Yeah, it's not very happy, really, is it? Yeah, but remember there was that one image, I think it was 17, which just came out beautifully. Just really, really nailed that. Okay, so let's have a look at something a bit further, because these were all only about 3-4 meters away from me. So I'm going to use a pigeon as an example that was in a tree really far away, and here you start noticing some really big things. So this is with the Sony A7, and that's it, obviously, how it was taken. And then when I crop in 1:1, the image is pretty good still, despite being far away. And then when I use, say, this one next to it, again, this image is still really usable. Topaz Denoise would make that look lovely, and I could just sharpen it up a tiny bit, and it looks like it's a pretty close image, but actually the camera's working hard. So the Sony A7 is going to clearly win here. And then let's have a look at the RX. It's not what I was hoping for. There it is. So then with the RX, it looks okay like this. You don't see too many differences. That's the A7. There's the RX. But when you crop in, it's really bad now. So there's the A7. and there's the RX. So it's a huge difference, and that is now unusable. Even with Topaz, I can't save that. When we have a look at these compared to the Nikon, you get some really amazing results. So here's the Nikon, which actually looks lovely like that. As soon as you zoom in, you then start to realize that there aren't lots of stabilization kind of working. So there's a bit of stabilization on the Tamron lens, but the Nikon doesn't have any inbuilt stabilization. However, when I was shooting with the A7, and that's really apparent from that image number 25 here, there's stabilization in body and there's stabilization in the lens, so it's significantly better. So there's a clear winner there, and to me that image is kind of unusable. Topaz would maybe just save it, but these aren't very good. There's a lot of blur, and you can see here you've got some problems as well as you start getting the lighting wrong around it. Okay, so let's just have a look at a few more bits, and you've probably already realized the results. So when it's the close images, the RX is pretty much the best because it's going to get it sharp every time, and then you can use editing to sort it. And also the RX has the huge advantage of having the Sony A9 processor in it, which is better than either of the other two, which is crazy because the A9 is a really professional camera, and they've decided to put that into Sony's bridge camera, the kind of speed that's available. So the A9 can do 20 frames per second, and they're quiet because that's using its silent shutter or its electric mode, and then the RX can actually do 24, which is even better than that. So the RX is currently one of the fastest burst cameras on the market ever, and it's brilliant as well because you're not going to scare animals with it, because it really is dead silent. I was doing some filming with it this morning, and it was not even picking up when I'm shooting images, whereas the other two obviously are going to. And the A7 doesn't have a silent shutter mode like the A9 does, because the A9 I think is actually 10, but then it will take you up to 20 if you want to put that mode on. Okay, so let's have a look at these last few images. So I've selected number 47. I thought this was really nice. It's probably the best image I've got from the RX today. And that one really starts to show that even if I zoom in, there's actually not too many problems with it. It's not as good as the others for the pixels, but it's really usable. And like that, especially, I think the natural colours as well that have come from that, really good. And that's had, you can see here, it's had a tiny bit of editing, and all I did was sharpen out the colours of all the camera. And then 57 I've put as well was really good. This was as best as I could get as a pigeon, and that's really far away. And then cropping in, you can even see his feet properly. And I think for a bridge camera, that's probably the best ever you'll get. I can't think of another bridge camera that will be better than that. I tested the Nikon P950 2 days ago, and that wasn't even close to that, even when you zoomed in. And don't forget, this one does have a digital optical clear image that it's called. So obviously it's optical, will go up to 600mm, and then it has a digital clear image, which means it's passable and pretty good. And then the digital zoom is kind of not good. We've also selected number 58 to show you what happened with the Tamron. So here's the Nikon camera, and the Tamron here is really, there's a lot of issues here with the blurriness, the stability, the ISO then was confused paired with this lens. The ISO might not be confused if you use a proper Nikon lens, but the Tamron, just threw the whole camera off, so that wasn't really usable. I'm just going to finish by showing you an image of the two Sonys next to each other. So this is really interesting. So here is an image of a crow, the back of it, and as you can see here, that for the bridge camera, for the RX, that's pretty passable, and the quality of the wings, it's okay, it's there, but it would be just to show someone a photo, you couldn't really publish this. However, when I compare it to the Sony A7, here's the quality of it, and I've edited this to try and make it sharper. I did the same with the RX. You can see this more clearly, there's a bit of vibration, but here you can start to see the wings are now starting to get really defined. And this was really far away, so this I cropped in like crazy. But then you get a lot of digital noise. So that brings me on to my last point. The digital noise on the Nikon is almost non-existent, because, well, obviously it will be because it's a because it's got a sensor which will click. But with this one here, because you've actually got a digital sensor, and because this isn't actually a DSLR, this is a mirrorless camera, so the mirrorless camera here will have a lot more noise. The bridge camera doesn't have nearly as much noise. It's visible even as you raise the ISO, and which is actually nicer when you edit because it's got so many less megapixels, because it's only got 20, whereas this has got 60.2. It says it's got 61.5, but it doesn't. It's got 60.2 that's coming up. And even when you edit it, you then need quite heavy denoise program to get rid of these. The Nikon, on the other hand, being a DSLR with a proper flippy up mechanism, which for some reason I can't remember the name of, that's got almost no digital noise. So let's just go to a Nikon photo, see if we can find one here. Yeah, here, so you see straight away, even when I zoom in, that noise is just a totally different type of noise. It's much nicer. Yeah, much nicer. But then as well, you get the difference of the clarity. So there's lots of information on these. If you want to ask anything, please do. And I hope you enjoyed watching it and learned a little bit about the cameras and the different systems that they've got. Okay, thank you very much, and I'll see you again soon.